I think the most important issue presented in Middlesex is about self-discovery and finding out who we are. And I think we get a really interesting insight into that exact type of self-discovery when Callie and Jerome have their sexual encounter. That's the moment that Callie, or maybe for the first time, Cal really discovers who he is. On page 35, as Jerome and Callie become intimate, Cal says, "Jerome knew what I was, and suddenly I did too. For the first time, I clearly understood that I wasn't a girl, but something in between. I knew this from how natural it felt to enter Rex Reese's body, how right it felt." This encounter with Jerome has shown Cal who he really is, or at least given him an idea of who he might become. And this realization kind of leads to Cal being willing to run away from home and really kind of experience life out on his own for the first time. He kind of ends up living a totally nomadic life because he's never quite comfortable in one spot, because he's always kind of shifting in between Callie and Cal. Eventually he even ends up in the Peace Corps, a place where he's able to bounce around the world and never really be in one specific spot, kind of like how Cal or Callie never feels like they're one person. And it also, with the Peace Corps, it's interesting that gives Cal an opportunity to help others that are displaced in a similar manner as Cal. When Cal runs away, he runs off to San Francisco, and on pages 468, 469, Cal is describing San Francisco for the first time. "Every morning a great wall of fog descends upon the city of San Francisco. That cold, identity-cleansing mist that rolls over the city every day explains better than anything else why that city is what it is." And San Francisco is kind of the perfect city for Cal to at first experience being a man, or living as a man. The city's history of being a safe space for queer lifestyles and intersex individuals like Cal affords Cal the opportunity to kind of experience living like a man and seeing what that kind of life is like. His whole life he has had to succumb to the gender role of being a woman, but in San Francisco, he's not directed by these social norms. He's allowed to remake himself every day if he needs, as the quote says, as the fog rolls over him. But in San Francisco, he's able to kind of explore the type of paths that eventually lead him to being able to find the Peace Corps. Cal is motivated to join the Peace Corps by San Francisco's history of acceptance. And it kind of leads Cal to wanting to help others in the same way that the city helped him discover who he was. And I really enjoyed Middlesex. It was a quick read, it was page-turning, but at the same time it forced me to kind of consider the struggles of a person like Cal, not only Cal as an intersex person, but also his whole family with their refugee status, even the status of forbidden love, and then Cal was just a really good example of what growing up is like, what being an adolescent is like. Callie deals with a lot of the same stuff that we all had to deal with, but with an added little twist that I thought was really interesting. The story being framed around his world events like World War I and even the rise of the Nation of Islam was kind of like Forrest Gumpy in a way that was cool for somebody that grew up in the 90s around that. But I really liked that the story was just kind of a good parallel of the American experience. Refugees like Desdemona and Lefty kind of had to make whatever sacrifices they had to make it in America. And although we might not necessarily agree with their decisions early on, that they were forced to make decisions, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the story. And I thought their experience was real. Lefty ran liquor in the 30s, and Chapter 11 tried to dodge the draft in the 70s. It really did seem like the Stephanides were living an American dream. And Cal, as an intersex individual, having the opportunity to live a normal life in a city like San Francisco, and then by joining the Peace Corps and experiencing the rest of the world that was able to accept him a little bit more, regardless of his identity, I really did think that that was kind of the definition of the American dream. And I thought reading the story of a young intersex girl and her transition to becoming a man, while also like learning about the history of how her genetic mutation came to be through the happenstance of life, I just thought was a really humanizing and intriguing way of telling that story. A lot of different forces kind of come into play to make us who we are. And I just really liked that about this book. I thought it did a really good job of presenting ideas that many of us might have trouble dealing with. It presented them in a really good and humanizing way that, even though it's a fictional story, it made me think more about the struggles of the LGBT community and refugees, and even just growing up as a kid. So I really enjoyed Middlesex. It was a great read, and this has been a great class. Thanks, everybody.